Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsy69 and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take another look at the AT-15 and how Wargaming gave it the wrong freaking buff. Wargaming buffed the reload and the alpha of this tank, as they done with quite a few different tank destroyers in the game. But in my opinion, it is completely the wrong buff for this tank. Here we are looking at the armor profile, and you can see the orange is, there is a lot of weak points in this tank, and even the red area is only around sort of 230 millimeters thick. So people can still get through that armor. You switch to gold and you can get shot anywhere. You can be shot anywhere on your freaking front. And not only that, obviously, you have weak sides, you have weak, the rear of your tank is weak. And in my opinion, Wargaming just gave it completely the wrong buff. It didn't need the DPM buff. The DPM on this tank is now 4,000, which is crazy, like 3,900. Absolutely a crazy amount of DPM for what it is. Now, it is a slow tank, very slow tank, as it's well known to be slow. And people that want to get to the Death Star, back in the day, a lot of people just golded the line because they weren't patient enough. Me included, I golded the line. They wasn't patient enough because these are boring tanks. Now, they were known to be these big, massive box of armor, the whole line. Basically, up until the Death Star, the whole line was just this slow box of armor just moving, and no one really knew how to deal with them. Where now people just switch to the premium ammunition if they can't penetrate, and you can get shot all over. So in my opinion, Wargaming, that was completely the wrong buff. It didn't need anything changing with its alpha, with its reload, with its DPM. The DPM was absolutely fine how it is. Wargaming should have buffed the armor profile on this thing because it's just too easy to get penetrated. Now, obviously, you're going to have guns like the T-49, which isn't the greatest of guns, frontally, especially with the heat. Tanks like that, or tanks like the medium tanks with low alpha, tier 7 especially, yeah, of course, you're going to get some bounces. Now, there, I just got absolutely wrecked from that T-49. He managed to get behind me, and that's the downfall with this tank. It's not only is it slow, like really slow, it just, in my opinion, just doesn't have any armor. And that's what this tank needs. It needs armor. There is just too many weak points with it, and there's really, the only way you can play this tank now is out DPM tanks. That is the only way you can play it. Sort of, you can't go hull down because you've got these big massive hatches on top. You can't really side scrape because you've got the big massive hatches. You've got the weak points at the side of the gun. So I just think that there is way too many weak points in this tank to be able to do what you need to do in this tank, and that's to bounce shots. It's a tank that can take shots. It's supposed to have a lot of armor, but for me, it's just, there's not enough armor. And that's not just this tank. This is the whole line. Look at the Tortoise. The Tortoise used to be known as the tank that just, with an amazing gun, and it just bounces everything. Where now, just anything penetrates you. Anything. So I think Wargaming needs to reevaluate the decision they've made. I don't mind if they sort of bring the DPM back down to sort of 3k, something like that, and just give it armor. Give it armor. That doesn't mean that you're not going to bounce any shots. Of course you're going to bounce shots. In this next game, we're going to bounce quite a bit of shots. But that's not the tank. That is not the tank. That's the player. That's the player you're coming up against. They should not be bouncing an AT-15. There is, like I said, there's just too many weak points on the tank for you to be able to bounce so many shots. So we're going to watch this game here, and this was actually in a stream I did a while ago, and you can make the tank good. You can make the tank good, but again, there's only one way that you can make the tank good, and that is to get into people's faces and out DPM them. That is the only way to play this tank. Now, I was going to go left on a map like this. Yeah, left is going up the hill is not great. It's not great because it's going to take you a while to get there. By the time you get there, either you or the enemy team have disappeared already. So we did spot, or my team did spot the tanks on the right side. So we are going to go back down and just help these in the town, and we're actually going to have a really good battle. Now, even though the weak points of the tank, you can see there is two hatches, one on the left and one on the right. They're both weak. Anything can sort of penetrate them. So if you are, if you want to know how to sort of try and at least get some bounces, if you're going to side scrape, in this, the side is actually really strong, the side armor, when you are in a side scraping position. So you definitely need to hide that hatch. That hatch is the biggest weak point. But then even when you hide the hatch, either side of the gun becomes very weak. So you can't really do too much. So you have to hide behind a building, or you have to hide behind a building or behind a tank or anything like that, and your main priority is to hide that hatch. You can sort of angle the rest of them, the rest of your tank, to actually generate the bounces, and we managed to get a bounce there from the Emil. And as I've previously said with the DPM, it's absolutely fantastic for perma-tracking. That is the plus. It is fantastic for perma-tracking tanks because the reload is so short, 3.4 seconds, and it's doing sort of 220, 230 shot, sort of most shots. So you have the DPM, you just don't have the armor, and that's what this tank needs. It needs armor. The whole line. I want Wargaming to sort of have a look at this line and think, okay, let's take away the DPM and let's give it armor. I would prefer that all day long. I'd prefer the armor over DPM. Now, we have managed to actually block 1400, nearly 1500 damage this game, but we have literally, all we did was use our DPM to win that game. It needed the DPM, and that's the only way you can play this tank now, is out DPM tanks. So it needs a buff. It does need a buff. It needs an armor buff. But on top of that, if it's going to have an armor buff, it needs a DPM nerf. But other than that, it is fun when it is played correctly now with that DPM. So it is an enjoyable tank. It can be. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Meadsy. Catch you soon. With